Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Guilty, where we look at games, movies, or whatever else strikes our fancy, then decide in our opinion whether it's good, bad, or a guilty pleasure. We're your host, Kit.
And Theron.
Okay, so next up is the sequel to Onimusha. Let's just see what we're looking at here. Oh, this is gonna hurt. Oh well, on with the review of
Onimusha 2, Samurai's Destiny. Onimusha 2, Samurai's Destiny is the second installment in the Onimusha series, released March 2002 in Japan, August 2002 for America, and then October 2002 for the rest of the world. Onimusha 2 was announced quickly after the release of Onimusha Warlords in America due to the fact that the development of Onimusha 2 began during the development of Onimusha Warlords. The characters and models were shown April 2001, the same year the game was announced. Same as the previous entry, Onimusha 2 was intended to be released on the PlayStation 1 console. Keiji Inafune saw this game as a way to include many things he originally wanted in the first game. My experience with this game started when I found the Onimusha 2 trailer on the Onimusha Warlords disc, showing a very interesting sequel game that was supposed to be in the works. Then I ended up getting the game and regretted it highly.
All there is to say for me on this game is I got it shortly after 1 because I enjoyed the first game. Graphically, I can say the game basically looks the same as the first game. It shows even more when you return to the castle from the first game and run around a little in the spots that you know from it. But this also shows just how shit this game is because you can compare it to the old. The two main things you will see is 1, the areas having too much or too little going on in, as in the caves, which made me have to pull up my map just to know where I'm going, or in the forest to even see my guy, or enemies sometimes, or number 2, the camera. In 1, the camera worked for the most of it, I always felt. Nothing too bad on where the swaps to a different fixed camera view were located, but for maybe a turn or two. But in 2, they're all over the place, making it so you either get blindsided by an enemy's attack, which you never saw happen because they're way off screen in a tucked off corner on the other side of the room, or running out of the room to find out that was the way you originally came in, which happened to me multiple times because of it.
Visually, Onimusha 2 looks almost identical in many ways to the first game, though it at times doesn't seem to have the same visual polish. At times as well, the areas almost seem to be just forgettable. Whereas in Onimusha 1, it seemed to be difficult to get turned around, playing through Onimusha 2, I found myself getting turned around multiple times, especially within the cave system in the early portion of the game. Much of the scenery looks a lot less interesting, eye-catching, or otherwise memorable, and instead feel like areas on repeat. Onimusha 2 starts with either a guy trying to imitate the narrator from the first game, or the narrator with some sort of tone change.
The nightmare, however, did not end. A few years later, his strength restored.
Attempting to explain that Samanosuke failed in the first game, in his attempt to kill Nobunaga even though Nobunaga wasn't Samanosuke's intended target in the first place. After that little generic, your efforts were worthless dialogue, we then meet our new hero of the tale, a samurai, Jubei Yagyu, from this point on referred to as Plank. A samurai so filled with emotion and personality that it becomes hard to forget he's a block of wood who has been smoking since the day he was born to get his lovely voice.
Who did this?
He returned to his home village, Yagyu Village, to find the place had been attacked and mostly killed by the forces of Oda Nobunaga. Correction, completely killed by the forces of Oda Nobunaga. On his way through the area, a mysterious voice calls to Plank and beckons him forth to tell Plank that Nobunaga was the man who attacked the village and tells him to go kill Nobunaga, and Plank just nods his head agreeing without the person showing any proof of such an attack. When Plank asks who this mysterious person is, they reveal they are Plank's mother, High-Pitched Snake Lady.
You can do it, my son.
After months, Plank finds his way to the location his mother told him to go to in order to begin his quest to instantly and conveniently walk right into one of the items he was sent there to get in the hands of a woman called Oyu. In his attempt to follow her, he runs into many other zany characters such as Kotaro, Magoichi, and Eke. all with their own generic standards implied to be stereotypes, such as the perverted fat guy who constantly wants food, the pirate guy, and the not kaede. Once Plank meets Oyu, he then announces he needs the gem she has because he was told by a snake lady to collect them all in order to kill Nobunaga, and without even questioning who this person is or why they want such a random item from them, she hands it over. Once they return to town, a demon, let's call her Porky Pig, suddenly decides to announce she will kill Plank's mother, to which Plank is upset about.
The chase is on!
Damn.
Thus, he and his group go to save his mother. They fail to save his mother. Miss Piggy gets to the mother first, and even though the mother has been shown to be powerful and even able to make herself ethereal, she ends up being stricken down by the equivalent of a purse to the chest, and it is revealed to Plank that it is his destiny to kill Oda Nobunaga. Wait, am I reading the wrong thing? Nope, he found out and vowed to kill Nobunaga twice. Rekindled his apparently forgotten passion for Nobunaga killing, and goes back to do just that. On the way, repeatedly running into an invincible talking mushroom with a sword that calls itself Gorgonzola.
My name is Gouda, the greatest swordsman of all demons.
The team proceeds to do pretty much nothing until the end, where Plank beats Nobunaga. Then Nobunaga activates a pachinko machine made out of an elephant and becomes Mega Ultra Super Nobunaga before being defeated once again by a piece of wood with a face, Jubei Yagyu. I don't usually like to be negative, but the story for this game sucks. While the first game was a little odd on pacing, as I expressed in that review, this game feels like a game of telephone was played between who is making the story. Ignoring the fact that Jubei is so dead lifeless through the majority of the game, most of the characters the player interacts with are one note to the point it's hard to remember their names half the time, and actually easier to remember their names as their stereotypes. Fat guy? Eke. Pirate guy? Magoichi. Not Kaede? Kotaro. A major problem as well is the tonal shift. While the first game wasn't exactly some horror bonanza, this game pretty much drops most of the tension to have an almost comical setup. First with a weird lead-in of a snake demon revealing herself to be Plank's mother, of which they later state he never met his mother, but then even later, reading details, it is revealed the Yagyu village he is a part of was outright made by demons, like his mother, and she would have no reason to hide in the first place. Next, with certain characters showing up and leaving in some rather annoying ways, to a sudden plotline that Nobunaga is the greatest evil, and even to information revealing demons made humans as a food, then, instead of just eating humans, apparently decided to make deals with them for food instead of literally just killing and eating them. The thing the lore says demons made them for. The game gets even weirder in this regard, but to move away from some of the silly or negative points, the game has different story beats in some places, depending on the way characters get stuff. At some points in the game, having characters reveal certain things to one another, usually in disjointed cutscenes, completely disconnected from Jubei at all. As well, I wasn't simply making a mockery of the story part about Jubei's reason to kill Nobunaga. The game starts with Jubei being told to kill Nobunaga, a sudden and almost instant statement that Snake Lady is Jubei's mother, and that he has to go to a specific town to get all the items needed to kill Nobunaga. And last but not least, he is part demon. All of this is revealed pretty much within a 5-minute span, and in the same conversation. Not only that, but then later when Snake Lady is killed, Jubei then says he is sure Nobunaga is at fault for the village's defeat, and that his destiny is to kill Nobunaga. Then later on after that, even though it is outright explicitly implied nearly to the point of showing it on screen that Jubei left on his journey to the destination his mother told him to go to, he reveals that his mother explained how he was conceived and many other things. Because apparently that was all stuff he stuck around to listen to her explain. To say the story is awkward feels like an understatement, is the point I'm trying to get across.
Okay, for the story. It's like someone chopped up the game, tossed it all around, then merged it back together again in one big mess of a plot. But the side stories add just that little extra helping more to really make you go,
what were they thinking?
As a lot of games do, you have the main story and the side story. But the side stuff that shows up here is based on who you become the most friendly with at the first bits of the start of the game via a weak dating sim thing. Depending on who you give gifts to or snub, this will make one of the 4 side characters show up for bits to talk about his or her stories when they're not a key part of the story like some spots are, open a chest that you can't open up, and help in a fight when your health drops too low or just passing through an area. While this does add replay to the game to a degree to get those small bits of story on the side, it hardly makes it worth doing, as they're all so bland and makes me just not care to remember their names that all I can do to remember them is by their weapons. Like that one guy with the spear or gun, or that one that's a ninja, or the other that's a forced romantic interest. To show how much, I'll just go through 2 of the side character stories, as I can't with the one ninja guy, as I didn't really get anything with him other than a, "Hey, I'm here, I'll watch the girl, bye," and leaving me standing there going, "What was that all about?" As I left town with the game not bothering to say that I'm never going to return here, so I couldn't erase his friendship level, much less get any story from him because of it. So I missed 1/4 of the game right there anyways. On with the 2! The one who I befriended the most was the gun guy, Magoichi. He's... I can't really recall. Alright, he's here to get good with Nobunaga to save his village, but you don't really learn any of that until near the end of the story. And the rest of it is just him helping you for some reason. He's not even really spying on you or trying to hamper you, he's just there. The other was the spear guy, Eki, who I put the rest of the work into. Though I'm sure his story is just part of the main game with how he wanted to make his daughter a princess, but his wife and child were killed in a fire, so now years later he's trying to become a lord to say that she was one or something, and that he has a feud with the gun guy, and also he wants to work with Nobunaga as well. The girl's story is interlaced with yours, so you will always find out she's the sister to Nobunaga, and that she's on her quest just because she wants to stop him, but stinks at it because she's wrote as a helpless girl your guy is meant to always save. While they all sound like brief summaries of each of their stories, no, that's it. That's everything for them. And if there's more to them, I really can't care, as none of them make me want to learn more about them to care if they got their wish in the end. Maybe the first time I saw the spear guy cry for the loss of his girl, I felt a little sad for him, but now it's like, what about your wife and the others who were there? Don't they get anything? None of them hold a candle to Kaede. Alright, let's start gameplay with the basics. Movement, once again, is the same with tank controls and grinding your face into walls when you're trying to turn, which of course this makes combat also the same, but for the addition of the charge move, which can be done by holding down R1. But I swear it's picky on how hard you have to hold it. This always felt to me like it worked when it wanted to. You can also link it with the partner when they call out ready and their weapon is glowing as well, but I was never sure if I pulled it off with them. The leveling system is back and even allows you to level your armor instead of finding it in a lockbox. Oh, and it also takes like 3 times the souls to level one weapon up a level compared to only one. As by the end of the game, most of my stuff was maybe halfway leveled up, while in the first game, by a bit past halfway mark, I was more or less done leveling up and I could use it to turn herbs and ammo into their better versions. This makes the game so much more grindy, and not only for souls, but for a new thing. Money.
We've got to have money.
Enemies and chests in the first third of the game drop money to give you another thing to grind for, and then becomes majorly useless and tossed to the 4 winds after a point, which they don't tell or warn the player on that they will never travel back to the hub town, even though we did before. The gold is used so you can buy gifts from the store in the gold mining town for the 4 helpers we talked about. You can use these items to raise their invisible friendship meter to make them appear in areas or trigger events with them. The problem with this is most of the time you have no clue, unless you have a guide, if they will like it or hate it. True, some of the items you will know to give to them, like the history book for the gunner, but only if you have all 10 volumes of it, otherwise he will hate it for not having the full set, or weapons for the spear guy. And once you leave town for the final time, you better have gifted them enough to, as you will not see them unless it's a major plot point in the main story to give them gifts, then if you even found any that they would like, which for the most part you won't have other than stuff to knock them out, or just other weird effects that have no use for. The whole money and gift mechanic was just very poorly placed into the game, as if they wanted to try it out but had zero clue what to do with it, much less how to. Once again, we have bosses, of course, but this time they take like 1,000,000 hits to beat, and much more annoying is there's only 3 bosses, and only one of them you fight once, as the rest of the time you have a rematch against the other 2. The Spider Guy's arenas are made where you can't see him most of the time, and the Cheese Guy, you have to fight him a few times, and you can only win against him using a flute at the very end. Hell, there is a part after fighting Miss Piggy where you will basically be drained of herbs, and the room after that is filled with poison gas. And then you have to fight Cheese Man for like 5 minutes before being saved, without being able to gain more herbs. And you will be drained before this fight, as the fight against Miss Piggy sucks a lot, as where you fight her is in her room, which is all manner of stuff that blocks you because of the tank controls and the super messed up camera positions, that for some reason have one tiny spot that only like 5% of the area is viewed, and the boss attacks you from the other side of the room out of the view of the camera. The same also happens for Cheese as well on the beach where you fight him, with a small sliver tucked away for no reason and rocks all over that make dodging a pain.
I'm very, very relaxed indeed. On the outside, but on the inside, I'm like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, a never-ending beginning on an ever-spinning reel, just like a snowball down a mountain, or a carnival balloon, or like a carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon, cause like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, see that the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, just like the circles that you find there in the windmills of your mind, just like a tunnel that you follow to a tunnel of its own, down a hollow to a cavern where the sun is never shown, just like a door that keeps revolving in a half-forgotten dream, or like the ripples from a pebble someone tosses in a stream, cause like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face, see that the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, just like the circles that you find there in the windmills of your mind. Keep it tingle in your pocket, watch it tingle in your head. Why did summer go so quickly? Was it something that you said? See lovers walk along the shore, leave their footprints in the sand, or is the sound of distant drumming just the fingers of your hands? Swinging in the hallway, see the fragment of a song, half remembered names and faces, but to whom do they belong? Cause when you knew that it was over, you were suddenly aware then that the autumn leaves are turning to the color of her hair, just like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning on an ever spinning reel. This is the images of wine, just like a circle that you find you're in the windmill of your mind. On the outside, I'm very calm.
The only nice bit of gameplay I can say is the Oni mode and the weapons. By collecting 5 purple souls that move very slow compared to the rest of them and open you up for attacks if not careful while drawing them in, you instantly transform into an Oni demon that can one-shot all the enemies with a slash and screen nuke. Though it comes with so many drawbacks that it's basically also useless as well. The first bad part is the second you grab the last of the 5 spirits, you automatically transform, and you can't pick when to activate it. This usually happened to me when I was almost done with fighting everything on the screen. The second part is it doesn't last long at all. At most just a few seconds, so if you didn't get it in the middle of the fight, you only have time to strike down maybe 2 or 3 depending on the enemy type before you have to kill the rest normally. Much more if the rest didn't spawn in till like 5 seconds after you killed the last. The weapons finally have a little bit more variety. You have the Thunder Sword, Wind Sword, and instead of the Bishamon Sword, you have the Fire Sword as the final prize from this game's Dark Realm from the first game. Aside from those though, this time you also get a spear with the power of ice and an iron hammer that uses earth moves. The variety helps to change the way you fight a little bit from swapping the swords to the spears to deal with different demons other than just what has power left. But once you get the iron hammer, it kinda gets tossed out as the hammer can break through a lot of guards or just flatten other enemies with a 1-2 hit, basically making every fight a press X to win.
Gameplay is mostly the same from Onimusha 1, except this time around it's tedious and annoying in many regards. Starting off, while the main form of combat is the same, they added some new mechanics, primarily the ability to charge the weapon to attack the opponents with special stronger moves. This isn't a bad thing, and it is useful through a good portion of the game, as well as allowing it to upgrade so the player can do more when it is charged higher. On a bad side though, the game has placed in a gift-giving system that decides who helps the player and how often they help them through parts of the game, depending on who the player gives items to the most. A large portion of the time, the gift-giving system is a guessing game and seems to be there just to justify one of the annoying time sink aspects to the game. Instead of seeming to actually make the game noticeably longer, the game uses a gold collection system for the early portion of the game, only for a portion of the game. Not the entire thing, mind you, where they want the player to collect large sums of gold to buy gifts for all the player's companions. When I say large sums, I mean well over 20 items, ranging from 100 gold to upwards to 3,000 gold per item is needed. Of which enemies in the area that drop said gold most of the time drop 10 gold, or if a player goes deep enough into the mine and finds specific enemies, they can get a whole 300 gold. After this section of the game, gold is basically never run into again, and the player won't even need the gold for anything either. The entire part seemed like it was there solely to give the player something to keep them from finishing too quick, as even if the player goes through and strikes down every single enemy one after the other from the beginning of the gold dropping area to the end of the gold dropping area, then back again, it is still likely to take an hour to an hour and a half to collect enough gold to have the majority of items, and they'll most likely need to go back to grind more gold anyway. As well, the first boss in the area leads to a recurring problem the game has. Whereas in the first game, if an enemy did an attack that couldn't be blocked, usually there was a way to avoid it. In Onimusha 2's case, if a boss wants to hit you with an unblockable attack, you're 9 times out of 10 getting hit. Most of them are near impossible to move out of the way of because they either happen too quick to avoid, or the camera in the level is set up in ways that make it a pain in the ass to judge where the enemy is to avoid it. That is actually the next point, the camera positioning. Camera positioning in Onimusha 1 wasn't horrible. Rarely did an enemy appear off screen in a way that made you walk right into them or allowed them to attack you unpunishably. A couple of enemies here and there, but for the most part if the player walked into an area, the enemies would be on camera. Onimusha 2 on the other hand really likes to screw the character with the camera. Enemies will spawn off the camera, then get swings off with little to no sound. Archers will spawn in areas that make it impossible to know they spawn there, then harass the player while they're busy dealing with more pressing issues. It gets annoying early on, as half the time the player loses health to this stuff. It feels unfair as there was no noticeable warning, and it happens often enough there's no way it was an accidental design choice. Oni mode is something added to the game, this time a useful transformation instead of the end result as seen in Onimusha 1's final cutscene. The problem is that it activates on its own. You collect enough of the correct orbs? Well done! You now have a timed mode that lasts a few seconds and you don't get a choice as to when it happens. You better hope that wasn't the final enemy you just killed. Then we have enemy spawning. The game spawns enemies in as the player fights in areas. Pretty standard. The problem is, it likes to spawn enemies off-screen, usually without much of a noise to indicate their existence. As well, the game likes to spawn them on a delay long enough sometimes the few enemies that the player is fighting will be dead for a very noticeable period before more spawn in. Like the spawns were designed to catch the player off guard while they were busy doing other things. It gets annoying. Last but not least, the boss progression. Or I guess the annoyance of bosses in general. First off, as mentioned prior, camera angles make some fights annoying because of the inability to properly judge enemy placement. The first boss the player fights will at one point start jumping around. You can't block this, and it's wide enough that the player has to be well out of the way, otherwise they will take damage from it. Next in line, we have Gouda, Mushroom Head himself. Supposedly the finest swordsman of demon history. He's a resource waster. I don't make that claim for nothing. He's literally invincible, and it's a survive against a clock you can't see fight, where the enemy can attack without much of a tell as to what attack they're going to do, and some of them can just ignore your block outright for no reason except the game figures you have too much healing supplies, and this fight is the best way to get rid of it. Then there is Babe, the later years, a pig in a dress who runs away the entire fight in a room with plenty of objects the player can get stuck on. Using tank controls, mind you, and shoots projectiles at the player until killed. Followed by the biggest middle finger in game design I think could possibly ever exist, after a boss that is basically designed to piss the player off while chewing their life away with projectile spam, another fight with Invincible McHathead. And if you're one of the types of people who like to have a neat and tidy save system where you play all in one go, better hope you got the supplies to waste on this guy, as they give him more ability to take your health away, and on top of that, they put a save right after Miss Piggy to ensure if you overwrite your save here, you're either wasting too much time and mental aptitude dealing with this obnoxious fight, or swapping to easy mode. It is infuriating and honestly feels like a purposeful kick in the teeth for the game to be set up in this fashion for the boss fights. Honestly, while the game had a couple nice ideas in it, all in all, this game is bad. Real bad.
For this game, let me put it this way. The only way I'll ever replay this game again is if I've forgotten how bad it is and think to myself, oh, it can't have been that bad. Then I'll play it for an hour until it's back on my do not play shelf. It's just that bad. Hopefully the sequel can redeem the series.
The fat guy sure does look at that child in an uncomfortable way.
What do I do, Lord?
Destroy the child, corrupt them all,